Have you ever noticed how satisfying it feels to tick something off your to-do list? That tiny check mark? That quick swipe to the right? That moment when a task disappears from your screen? It feels good, doesn't it? Almost like a small victory, a private celebration. We tell ourselves, yes, I'm being productive. I'm in control. But have you ever paused to ask yourself what that feeling really means? Is it genuine progress, or just a comforting illusion of progress? Everywhere you look, the to-do list is celebrated as a badge of discipline. In offices, in productivity apps, even on social media, people proudly share their color-coded systems and bullet journals as if organization itself were a form of enlightenment. We've been taught that the more we plan, the more control we have over our lives, that a full schedule equals a full life. But here's the question I want to explore with you today. What if the opposite is true? What if our obsession with managing time is quietly managing us? Think about your own day. Maybe you start your morning already scrolling through tasks, mentally checking what needs to be done before breakfast. You cross off a few items, add a few more, and somehow, the list never really ends. It grows faster than you can keep up. You go to bed feeling that strange mixture of exhaustion and guilt. Tired because you did too much, and guilty because you didn't do enough. It's as if your worth depends on how many things you've accomplished, rather than on how deeply you've lived the moments between them. The to-do list has become more than just a tool. It's almost a cultural ritual, a symbol of being a together person, someone who's on top of things. We're told that if we can just get organized, we'll finally feel at peace. But peace doesn't live on paper, does it? It's not something you can tick off like buy groceries or reply to emails. Peace, presence, connection, these aren't tasks. They're states of being. And yet, we treat them as items we can schedule, as if meaning itself could be managed. Now, don't get me wrong, lists aren't evil. They can help us remember, structure, prioritize. But somewhere along the way, we've started using them not just to manage tasks, but to measure ourselves. We look at that unfinished list and feel like we've failed, as if the unchecked boxes were proof of our inadequacy. And that's the myth I want to challenge. The idea that productivity equals purpose, or that busyness equals value. So, before we go any further, I'd like you to ask yourself something. When was the last time you did something not because it was on your list, but simply because it felt right? Maybe you lingered over a conversation, took a walk without tracking your steps, or allowed yourself to do nothing. Not out of laziness, but out of trust. These moments often reveal a deeper kind of productivity, the kind that nourishes your inner world rather than just your calendar. In this episode of Code Your English, we're going to gently unpack this myth. We'll explore why we cling to our to-do lists, what they say about our inner dialogue, and how we might begin to live and learn without being ruled by them. So take a deep breath, put your list aside for a few minutes, and let's begin. The psychology of productivity. Let's take a closer look at why we love our to-do lists so much. Not just practically, but psychologically. Because it's not just about getting things done, is it? There's something deeper going on beneath the surface, something almost emotional. Every time we cross something off, our brains reward us. Quite literally. That tiny moment of satisfaction you feel when you tick a box or delete a task? That's dopamine, a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and motivation. It's the same chemical that lights up when we get a like on social media or find a good deal online. Our brains are wired to crave that small burst of accomplishment. It feels like proof that we're moving forward, that we're in control, even if the progress is just symbolic. But here's the tricky part. The more we chase that little hit of satisfaction, the more dependent we become on external validation. We start to measure our worth in completed tasks, rather than in the quality of our experiences. It's like training yourself to feel enough only when you're doing something. Over time, this can turn into a subtle addiction, the productivity rush. We become restless whenever we're still, uncomfortable in the quiet spaces of our own mind. Instead of resting, reflecting, or simply being, we reach for the next task, the next tick, the next dopamine spark. We tell ourselves we're being efficient, but really, we might just be soothing anxiety. This craving for completion ties into something bigger, our cultural story about what it means to be successful. From an early age, many of us are taught that achievement equals worth. We're rewarded for results, praised for busyness, and admired for multitasking. Keep yourself busy becomes both advice and warning, as if stillness were a form of failure. We grow up believing that if we're not doing something, we're wasting time. That belief follows us into adulthood, shaping how we structure our days and even how we talk about ourselves. When someone asks, "How are you?" how often do we reply, "Busy," as if that one word somehow sums up our importance? It's fascinating and a bit sad how easily we accept this mindset. We wear our exhaustion like a medal, proof that we're working hard, pushing forward, staying relevant. But beneath the surface, there's often a quiet exhaustion, a sense of running on empty, of chasing our own tails. And what's more, this constant doing can become a shield, protecting us from uncomfortable emotions or deeper questions about meaning. If we stay busy enough, we don't have to face our doubts, our fears, or that lingering feeling that maybe, just maybe, all this motion isn't leading us where we truly want to go. To-do lists, in that sense, offer the illusion of control. They give us the sense that life can be managed, that if we just plan well enough, nothing will slip through the cracks. But life, as we both know, doesn't always cooperate with our plans. People change, circumstances shift, emotions fluctuate. And no matter how long your list is, there will always be something you didn't anticipate. An unexpected problem, a sudden inspiration, a moment of loss or love. The irony is that the more tightly we try to hold on to control, the more fragile that control becomes. What makes this dynamic so powerful and so dangerous is that it reinforces our limiting beliefs about success and self-value. If I believe I'm only good enough when I'm achieving, then every unfinished task becomes a small failure. Every lazy afternoon, a threat to my identity. It's like having an invisible scoreboard running in your mind, tallying up wins and losses that no one else can see. The inner dialogue becomes relentless. You should be doing more. You're falling behind. You're not organized enough. These thoughts sound rational, even responsible, but they quietly drain our sense of joy and creativity. They keep us stuck on autopilot, mistaking constant motion for genuine growth. And let's be honest, our society rewards this behavior. We're surrounded by productivity culture, books promising to help us hack our mornings, apps that track every minute, podcasts urging us to maximize every second. But the truth is, life isn't a spreadsheet. We can't optimize our way to meaning. Sometimes the most valuable moments are the ones that don't fit neatly into a list. The unexpected conversation, the quiet walk, the idea that comes when you stop trying so hard to think. So maybe it's time to ask a different kind of question. Not, what do I need to do today? But, why am I doing what I'm doing? When we slow down enough to listen to that question, we start to see that productivity, in its healthiest form, isn't about speed or quantity. It's about alignment. It's about moving in ways that reflect who we really are, not who we think we're supposed to be. And that's where we'll go next, into the deeper cost of this constant doing, and what happens when our need to control every moment begins to control us. But for now, take a breath. Step away from your list for just a second. Notice how it feels to simply be, without the pressure to achieve. Maybe that's the first step in rewriting your own psychology of productivity. The cost of constant doing. Let's be honest, most of us are always doing something. Even when we're not physically active, our minds are ticking away in the background, scanning through what's next, what's unfinished, what needs fixing. It's as if silence itself has become uncomfortable, almost threatening. We fill every pause, every gap, with activity. Or at least, with the thought of activity. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what is the real cost of living this way? When every moment is scheduled, and every breath feels like an item on a list, what are we actually losing? One of the first costs is something we all recognize but rarely talk about: burnout. It doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in quietly, disguised as ambition or responsibility. You start by pushing a little harder, telling yourself it's temporary, that you'll rest once things calm down. But that moment rarely comes, does it? The to-do list refills as quickly as you empty it. And before long, you're running on fumes, physically present, but emotionally and mentally drained. You wake up tired, go through the motions, and start measuring your days by how much you got through rather than how much you truly experienced. And it's not just physical exhaustion, it's decision fatigue too. Every choice we make, from answering emails to deciding what to cook for dinner, demands mental energy. When our days are crammed with constant decisions, our brains never get a chance to rest. It's no wonder that by the evening, even simple choices, like whether to go for a walk or what movie to watch, can feel overwhelming. We end up defaulting to easy, habitual options, not because we're lazy, but because our cognitive batteries are empty. The truth is, the human mind isn't built to operate in perpetual high gear. It needs stillness to recharge, to make connections, to create meaning. And that brings us to another cost, perhaps the most subtle and devastating of all: the erosion of creativity and presence. Creativity doesn't thrive on pressure. It thrives on space. Those moments of inspiration you've had, they probably came when your mind was wandering, not when you were frantically multitasking. Maybe it was during a walk, a shower, or while staring out of a window. That's because creativity lives in the spaces between tasks, in the unscheduled moments where your brain can breathe, play, and explore without being told what to do. When our lives become a series of tightly packed activities, we squeeze out the very conditions that allow insight and authenticity to grow. Presence works the same way. You can't schedule presence, you can only allow it. When we live in a constant state of doing, we stop truly noticing. We rush through meals without tasting them, through conversations without listening, through achievements without feeling. Life starts to feel like a blur. Busy, yes, but strangely hollow. You might find yourself lying in bed at night, wondering why, despite everything you've done, something still feels missing. That emptiness isn't a sign of failure, it's a signal. It's your inner voice reminding you that doing and living aren't the same thing. And yet, slowing down can feel almost rebellious in a world that celebrates speed. We're surrounded by messages that glorify productivity. Hustle harder. No days off. Sleep when you're dead. Rest is often mistaken for weakness, when in reality, it's one of the deepest forms of wisdom. To pause, to breathe, to say, "Not today," that's not laziness, that's alignment. It's choosing to listen to your body, your mind, your intuition, rather than to the constant hum of external expectations. This isn't easy, of course. Many of us carry invisible beliefs that tell us we must always be achieving to be worthy. Maybe it's something we absorbed from family, culture, or work. Maybe it's just the fear of falling behind. But the truth is, you can't outrun exhaustion by doing more. You can only heal it by being more present, by giving yourself permission to exist outside of tasks, to feel, to breathe, to notice, to just be. So let me ask you something, and take a moment to really think about it. When do you allow yourself to just be, without an agenda? Not because it's in your calendar, not because it's Self-Care Sunday, but because you trust that you don't need to earn your rest. Imagine sitting quietly, maybe with a cup of tea, your phone out of reach, no music, no notifications. How long before the urge to do something kicks in? That tiny discomfort is worth paying attention to because it shows how deeply we've been conditioned to equate stillness with stagnation. But here's the paradox. Stillness isn't the opposite of growth. It's the foundation of it. Just like a seed needs darkness before it can sprout, our minds need space before they can imagine. The moments we spend not doing are often the very moments when we start becoming. So maybe the next time you feel that urge to fill every gap in your day, pause instead. Take one deep breath and remind yourself, life isn't a list to complete. It's an experience to inhabit. And perhaps the most productive thing you can do is to step out of constant doing and remember what it feels like to simply exist. The inner dialogue. What are you really chasing? Let's turn the spotlight inward for a moment, because beneath the surface of our daily routines, the scheduling, the planning, the checking off boxes, there's usually something much deeper at play. It's not just about staying organized or being efficient. It's about what those things mean to us on an emotional level. The truth is, our relationship with productivity often reveals our relationship with ourselves. The to-do list might look like a simple external tool, but it's often a mirror reflecting our internal dialogue, the quiet, constant voice that tells us who we are and who we should be. Ask yourself this: when you rush to finish something, what's really driving you? Is it enthusiasm or is it fear? Maybe it's the fear of falling behind, of being seen as lazy or unmotivated. Or perhaps it's that subtle, relentless whisper that says, if I do more, I'll finally feel enough. This inner voice, shaped by years of expectations from family, school, work, and society, becomes the invisible engine behind our to-do obsession. It convinces us that our worth depends on our output, that peace must be earned through productivity. And so, without even realizing it, we start living in service of that voice. Perfectionism often hides behind this behavior. On the surface, it looks like dedication, a drive for excellence, a high standard. But perfectionism isn't really about doing things well. It's about fear. The fear of not being enough, of being exposed, of losing control. Every item on the list becomes a test, every delay a tiny failure. And the list never truly ends, because the goal isn't to finish, it's to prove something, to yourself or to others. It's a kind of psychological hamster wheel. No matter how fast you run, you never arrive. You're constantly chasing approval, validation, or a sense of peace that never lasts for long. And this chase has a hidden cost. It keeps us trapped in an internal cycle of self-criticism. That inner dialogue becomes harsh, demanding, impatient. You might recognize that voice, the one that says, "You should be doing more," or "You're wasting time." Sometimes it sounds rational, even helpful, as if it's pushing you toward success. But in truth, it's often anxiety wearing the mask of ambition. It's that subtle pressure to prove yourself, to keep up, to stay relevant, to be seen as capable. The irony is that the more we listen to it, the less we actually hear ourselves. So what's underneath that need to be on top of things? Maybe it's a desire for safety, the feeling that if everything is under control, nothing can hurt you. Maybe it's about identity, about being the dependable one, the achiever, the one who never drops the ball. Or maybe it's a way of avoiding discomfort. Because if you stay busy, you don't have to face uncertainty, loss, or loneliness. In that sense, the to-do list can become a form of emotional armor. It gives structure to chaos, predictability to fear. It's comforting, but it also keeps you from the deeper work of asking, what am I really feeling? What am I really chasing? Sometimes, what we're chasing isn't success at all. It's relief. Relief from the constant hum of self-doubt, from the guilt of not being productive enough, from the anxiety that we're not measuring up. The list becomes our coping mechanism. Every completed task feels like a small reassurance. See? You're okay. You're doing fine. But that reassurance fades quickly, doesn't it? By the end of the day, the list is refilled, and the cycle begins again. It's an emotional loop that keeps us busy, but rarely fulfilled. Imagine, for a moment, that your to-do list could talk. What would it say about you? Would it sound like a supportive friend, encouraging, flexible, forgiving? Or more like a strict manager, always demanding, never satisfied? The tone of that imagined voice often mirrors your inner one, and if that voice is constantly critical, it might be time to rewrite the script. Because the truth is, self-compassion can be just as powerful a motivator as self-criticism, and far more sustainable. Let's use a metaphor. Picture your life as a scoreboard, one that only you can see. Every achievement, every success lights up a new point. But here's the catch. The rules keep changing, and the goalposts keep moving. No matter how much you accomplish, the scoreboard never feels full. That's what happens when we attach our sense of worth to performance. The game never ends. But what if you turned off the scoreboard altogether? What if your sense of value came not from how much you do, but from how deeply you exist? How honestly you show up? How kindly you treat yourself? How courageously you live your truth? So let me ask you, what are you really chasing? Is it success? Or is it peace? Is it recognition? Or is it self-acceptance? When you feel that rush to accomplish, to control, to tick one more box, pause and listen. Beneath the noise of busyness, there's usually a quieter longing for meaning, connection, or rest. And that longing doesn't need to be managed or completed. It just needs to be heard. Because maybe the real goal isn't to conquer your to-do list, but to make peace with the part of you that believes you have to. From doing to being. Redefining productivity. Let's take a deep breath together and imagine, just for a moment, a different way of living. Imagine waking up in the morning without immediately reaching for your phone or scanning your mental list of things to do. Instead, you pause, you stretch, breathe, and ask yourself one simple question. How do I want to show up today? Not what do I need to do, but who do I want to be? It sounds simple, but that small shift, from doing to being, has the power to change the entire rhythm of your life. For most of us, productivity has been defined by doing. It's about output, efficiency, visible results. We're taught to measure our worth in completed tasks, to prove our value through action. But what if true productivity isn't about doing more? It's about being more present in whatever we do. What if it's less about managing time and more about aligning with intention? Imagine trading the endless ticking of the clock for the quiet guidance of a compass, one that doesn't measure hours, but direction. A clock tells you how fast you're moving. A compass reminds you where you're headed. That's the difference between living reactively and living consciously. When we're caught up in constant doing, we often move quickly but blindly, reacting to external pressures, obligations, and expectations. Our actions become automatic, habits dressed as choices. We rush from one thing to another, not because it's meaningful, but because it's familiar. But when we shift into being, our behavior starts to flow from awareness rather than habit. We pause before we act. We choose based on purpose, not pressure. We stop running and start listening to our body, to our intuition, to the quiet voice that knows when to move and when to rest. This isn't about rejecting action or responsibility. It's about restoring balance, the delicate balance between effort and ease, striving and surrender. Think of your life as a piece of music. If every note were played at full speed with no rests, the melody would collapse into noise. It's the pauses, the moments of stillness, that give music its shape, its emotion, its meaning. The same is true for us. We need the pauses to reconnect with what matters, to remember why we're doing what we're doing. Otherwise, our days become busy but hollow, full of sound but lacking harmony. And let's be clear, choosing being doesn't mean abandoning your goals. It means approaching them from a different place, a place of clarity instead of compulsion. You still write the report, send the email, make the call. But you do it with awareness, not anxiety. You stop chasing outcomes and start cultivating presence. When you're fully engaged, even ordinary actions, washing dishes, answering messages, walking to work, can feel grounded, alive, and meaningful. Presence transforms the mundane into something sacred. Of course, this shift isn't easy. We live in a world that celebrates busyness. Slowing down can feel like swimming against the current. People might even judge you for it. Or worse, you might judge yourself. That inner critic might whisper, "You're wasting time." But here's the paradox. When you act from presence, you often end up being more effective, not less. Because clarity cuts through confusion. When your mind is calm, you make better decisions. When your actions come from purpose, you waste less energy on what doesn't truly matter. The key lies in intention, not the long-term, strategic kind, but the moment-to-moment awareness of why you're doing something. Before you open your laptop, ask yourself, what's my intention right now? Am I working out of fear or out of curiosity? Am I saying yes because I mean it or because I'm afraid to disappoint someone? These small check-ins anchor you in being. They remind you that your life isn't a list to complete. It's a journey to inhabit. So here's a reflective question I'd like you to sit with. How much of your daily behavior is driven by conscious intention? And how much by habit? It's not a question to answer quickly. Let it stay with you. Notice throughout your day how often you act automatically. Replying to a message without thinking, checking your phone just to fill a gap, saying yes when your body is quietly saying no. Awareness is the first step to transformation. Once you see your patterns, you can choose differently. Think of this shift as moving from a clock mindset to a compass mindset. The clock measures productivity in hours and minutes. The compass measures it in meaning and direction. The clock asks, "How much did you do today?" The compass asks, "Did you move closer to what truly matters?" One keeps you chasing, the other keeps you aligned. Redefining productivity in this way doesn't mean doing less. It means doing what aligns with who you are. It means replacing external pressure with internal clarity. It's a transformation from control to connection, from rushing to rhythm. And once you start living this way, you realize something powerful. Your value was never in the boxes you ticked, but in the presence you bring to each moment you live. So as you move through your day, try putting the list aside for a moment. Let your actions flow from awareness rather than anxiety. You might discover that being, truly being, is the most productive state of all. Redefining achievement. Let's pause for a moment and ask a deceptively simple question. What does achievement really mean? Most of us are conditioned to answer this in terms of output. Tasks completed, emails sent, projects finished, deadlines met. We've been taught that success is measurable, quantifiable, tangible. But when we step away from the checklist, when we stop equating our worth with productivity, we start to see that achievement can feel very different. It doesn't have to come with fanfare or numbers or applause. Sometimes achievement is quiet. Sometimes it's invisible. And often, it's far more profound. Think about moments when you felt deeply fulfilled, not in a public or visible way, but inside, in the core of your being. Maybe it was the afternoon you spent talking with a friend and truly listening, without checking your watch or thinking about your next obligation. Maybe it was a walk in the park where you noticed the light on the leaves, the way the wind moved through the trees, the small miracle of the ordinary. Or perhaps it was a creative spark, a sketch, a journal entry, a song, a solution to a problem, that emerged not because you were productive, but because you allowed yourself the time and space to explore. That's achievement in a different language. Achievement that nourishes rather than exhausts, that connects rather than isolates. Let me give you a practical example. A friend of mine, a graphic designer, used to live by her to-do list. Every day was scheduled down to the hour, and she measured her success by how many projects she completed. She rarely paused, rarely reflected, rarely let herself be bored. But then, during a particularly overwhelming week, she decided to stop tracking output. She set aside the pressure to deliver and allowed herself to experiment without a goal. At first, it felt strange, uncomfortable even, as if she were abandoning responsibility. But slowly, she began to notice something remarkable. Ideas flowed more freely. Designs emerged that were richer, more imaginative, more authentic. She discovered that when she focused less on quantity and more on quality of presence, her work became more meaningful, not just to her clients, but to herself. And the sense of fulfillment she experienced wasn't fleeting. It was lasting. That quiet sense of satisfaction, that inner alignment, had little to do with how much she'd done, and everything to do with how deeply she had engaged with what she cared about. Achievement can be reframed in this way. It's not about output alone. It's about alignment with values, growth, and connection. It's about nurturing the parts of life that truly matter: relationships, curiosity, creativity, and self-understanding. When we redefine achievement this way, the pressure of the to-do list diminishes. We no longer chase arbitrary metrics. We follow what feels meaningful. And suddenly, life becomes richer, quieter, and fuller. There's also an emotional dimension here that's worth noticing. When achievement is tied only to tasks and external validation, we often feel a subtle, gnawing emptiness, a sense that we're never enough, no matter how much we accomplish. But when we broaden our definition to include growth, connection, and moments of meaning, we cultivate a deeper sense of satisfaction. We start to feel enough in the present moment, rather than perpetually striving for an imagined future. This isn't about settling. It's about recognizing the value of the life we're actually living, rather than the life we think we should be living. Achievement also shifts when we consider time differently. Instead of seeing life as a series of check boxes to complete, we can see it as a continuum of experiences, some big, some small, each contributing to the tapestry of our personal growth. Completing a work project is meaningful, yes, but so is listening deeply to someone's story, cooking a nourishing meal, or taking time to reflect on a lesson learned. These moments might not show up on any list, but they shape us in profound ways. So here's a reflective prompt for you. Imagine your life without a to-do list. How would you measure success? What would feel like achievement? Perhaps it's the warmth of a conversation, the spark of a creative idea, the calm after a mindful pause, the quiet pride in having acted in alignment with your values. Start noticing those moments, the ones that make you feel alive, present, and connected. They are the real markers of accomplishment. In this light, achievement becomes less about external validation and more about internal resonance, less about racing to the next milestone and more about savoring the journey, less about what you can check off and more about how you show up, authentically, intentionally, and fully. That's a version of success that no list can capture, and yet it is profoundly, beautifully real. Redefining achievement invites a shift from performance to presence, from comparison to self-alignment, from external rewards to intrinsic fulfillment. It reminds us that life is measured not only by what we do, but by how deeply we experience, how compassionately we connect, and how courageously we grow. And in that redefinition, we discover a kind of accomplishment that is both gentle and enduring, the kind that leaves you feeling whole at the end of the day. Practical reimagining. Living without the list. Let's get practical for a moment, because while all this talk of inner dialogue, being overdoing, and redefining achievement can feel inspiring, it can also feel abstract. How do you actually live without a to-do list in the middle of a busy life? The truth is, you don't need chaos or disorder to live more intentionally. Structure and spontaneity aren't enemies. They can coexist beautifully when guided by awareness. It's less about tossing organization out the window and more about reimagining the way you interact with your time, your tasks, and your energy. Imagine waking up in the morning and pausing before reaching for your phone or diving straight into work. Instead of asking, "What must I accomplish today?" you ask, "What matters most today?" That subtle shift, from checking off tasks to prioritizing meaning, changes the rhythm of your day. You might decide that today's theme is connection, and so you invest time in a deep conversation with a colleague, a friend, or even yourself through journaling. Or perhaps the theme is curiosity, and you allow yourself to explore a new idea, a book, or a creative project without an immediate goal in mind. The focus moves from discrete actions to overarching intentions, guiding your choices without micromanaging every minute. One practice that helps is morning reflection. Take 5 or 10 minutes, a brief window of calm, to breathe, settle, and ask yourself, what kind of energy do I want to carry? How do I want to show up for others? What do I want to remember by the end of today? Write it down if it helps, but there's no need to create a checklist. Let your intention act as your internal compass. During the day, You can return to it whenever you feel off track, not as a measure of success or failure, but as a gentle reminder of your focus. It's an approach that cultivates mindfulness and reduces the constant pressure to perform. Another way to reimagine your day is to organize it around themes rather than tasks. Instead of saying, "I have 5 emails to send, 3 calls, and a report to finish," you might frame your day around ideas like creativity, presence, and care. Within those broad categories, actions will naturally emerge. Writing an email can become part of care, a brainstorming session part of creativity, a team check-in part of presence. The themes act like lenses, filtering your decisions, so that even when you act spontaneously, your energy and attention remain aligned with what truly matters. Let's take a concrete example. Imagine a teacher who used to live by a rigid schedule: lesson planning, grading, meetings, parent calls, all tracked meticulously on a color-coded calendar. She felt efficient, but also exhausted, like she was running on a treadmill without end. One day, she decided to experiment. She kept a broad structure: mornings for teaching, afternoons for preparation, but removed rigid time blocks for every single task. Instead, she chose a theme for each day: connection, curiosity, or reflection. On a connection day, she lingered with students, listened more deeply, and let conversations guide the flow of the classroom. On a curiosity day, she explored new teaching methods, read widely, and allowed herself to experiment. By letting themes guide her actions instead of a checklist, she discovered creativity, joy, and energy she hadn't felt in years, while still getting her essential work done. A simple tool to help is setting intentions for blocks of time rather than individual tasks. For instance, morning hours might be dedicated to focus, afternoons to collaboration, evenings to reflection or rest. Within these blocks, you respond to needs and opportunities as they arise, guided by the overarching intention rather than by rigid scheduling. This allows flexibility and spontaneity without slipping into chaos. The list becomes unnecessary because your attention is anchored by clarity of purpose, not by obligation. So, here's a reflective question to hold in your mind. What would your day look like if you trusted yourself to remember what truly matters? How would it feel to start each morning by asking, not, "What must I do?" but, "What do I want to bring to this day?" Imagine noticing the subtleties around you: the texture of your environment, the energy of the people you meet, the quiet moments that often pass unnoticed. Imagine completing the day with a sense of inner satisfaction rather than relief at crossing off items. Living without a list isn't about abandoning responsibility. It's about living with conscious intention. It's about replacing the rigid structure of checkboxes with the fluid guidance of awareness. It's about creating a rhythm that allows you to respond to life rather than react to pressure. You can still achieve, still deliver, still grow. But the driving force becomes purpose, presence, and alignment instead of external obligation. By embracing these practices, morning reflection, intention setting, thematic focus, you reclaim time, attention, and energy. You shift from ticking boxes to cultivating a life that feels meaningful, alive, and fully your own. In essence, living without the list is not chaotic. It's intentional, not unfocused, but guided, not passive, but deeply engaged. And when you try it, even for a single day, you may discover a freedom and clarity that the to-do list never gave you. It's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it, and, more importantly, why. Living by intention, not obligation. Let's explore a subtle but profound shift, moving from obligation to intention. Most of us navigate our days driven by lists, deadlines, and expectations, believing that this is the only way to stay productive, responsible, or successful. But consider this: when we live by obligation, our choices are dictated by external pressure rather than inner clarity. We act out of habit, habitually checking boxes, often on autopilot, rarely stopping to ask whether what we are doing aligns with what truly matters. Living by intention flips this script. It invites mindful awareness, agency, and intrinsic motivation. It asks not, "What must I do?" but, "What do I wish to bring into this day?" Living by intention is not about creating a perfect plan or eliminating structure. It's about starting with alignment, understanding your values, your energy, your priorities, and letting those guide your actions. For instance, instead of scheduling every minute, you might set an intention for the morning. I will engage with curiosity and openness. The afternoon might carry a different intention. I will nurture connection and listen deeply. Within these broad guides, your actions emerge naturally. You respond to what matters in the moment rather than adhering to a rigid list that may not reflect your evolving priorities. The list becomes secondary to the alignment of your actions with your values. This approach also cultivates presence. When we are constantly chasing tasks, we operate in a future-oriented mindset, fixated on completion and outcomes. Intention-driven living shifts the focus to the here and now. You notice subtleties: a conversation that sparks insight, a quiet moment of reflection, or a fleeting creative impulse. Presence allows you to act with deliberation rather than reaction, to choose with awareness rather than obligation. Over time, this strengthens your intrinsic motivation, the deep, internal drive to act from curiosity, care, or creativity, rather than from external validation or social expectation. Let's imagine a practical scenario. Picture a writer who typically fills every day with a strict schedule of drafts, edits, and submissions. Exhausted and uninspired, she experiments with a new approach. Each morning, she asks herself, "What do I want to explore today?" She may choose a theme: curiosity, play, or reflection, and allow her writing to follow that intention rather than a preset word count. Surprisingly, her output improves, but more importantly, her engagement and satisfaction deepen. Her actions are no longer a reaction to a to-do list. They are expressions of her values and interests. You can test this mindset shift yourself with a simple reflective question. What would my day look like if I followed my curiosity instead of my list? Even imagining this scenario can reveal how much of your daily behavior is shaped by obligation versus authentic choice. It uncovers the ways habits, routines, and external pressures can overshadow your agency. Living by intention transforms not just the structure of your day, but the texture of your experience. Ultimately, this is a practice of conscious alignment. It requires gentle self-questioning, repeated reflection, and a willingness to prioritize being overdoing. By living according to intention rather than obligation, you reclaim agency, deepen your awareness, and foster a sense of intrinsic fulfillment. Your actions become guided by values rather than pressure, and your days are shaped not by the tyranny of the checklist, but by the clarity of mindful choice. This is not a small change. It is a subtle yet powerful transformation, a shift from living for tasks to living for meaning. The transformation: rediscovering flow and freedom. Imagine for a moment the sensation of releasing control, not recklessly, but deliberately, like opening your hands to let water flow freely. For many of us, letting go of rigid schedules and endless to-do lists feels terrifying at first. After all, we've been taught that structure equals security, that ticking boxes equals competence. But what if true security and competence emerged not from control, but from presence? What if creativity, resilience, and emotional balance thrived in the spaces left by letting go? This is the essence of transformation, discovering the rhythm beneath the noise, the flow that exists when we stop fighting life's natural cadence. When we surrender the obsessive grip on tasks, something remarkable happens. Our minds, once cluttered with obligations, begin to clear. Decision fatigue softens. The constant hum of must do, must finish is replaced by a quiet pulse, a sense of attunement with our own internal rhythms. We begin to notice subtle cues, the spark of curiosity when we engage with a new idea, the warmth of connection when we truly listen to someone, the gentle satisfaction of completing something meaningful rather than simply checking it off. In this state, our actions are no longer mechanical responses. They are intentional, expressive, and alive. Creativity, in particular, flourishes when control is loosened. Consider a painter or a writer who works from intuition rather than a plan. They allow the brush or pen to follow impulse, trusting their inner guidance. Similarly, when we release the tyranny of the to-do list, our daily lives can become an improvisation, structured enough to provide stability, but flexible enough to allow surprises and insights to emerge. This is the essence of flow, a state where effort and ease coexist, where time seems elastic, and where we engage fully with the present without the weight of obligation pressing down. The emotional benefits are equally profound. By relinquishing rigid control, we cultivate resilience. Challenges are met with adaptability rather than panic. Mistakes become lessons rather than failures. The relentless pressure to perform diminishes, replaced by a quiet confidence that we are capable of navigating life's complexities, guided by values and awareness rather than checklists. Authenticity emerges naturally. When we stop measuring ourselves by what we complete, we can act in ways that are aligned with our true selves. Think of this transformation as a dance. At first, our movements are stiff, choreographed by rules and expectations. But when we let go, we find rhythm. We begin to respond to the music of our own inner life, to the subtle beats of curiosity, presence, and purpose. There is freedom in this dance, a freedom that doesn't exist in the rigid linearity of lists and schedules. It is a liberation that reconnects us with our intrinsic motivation, with the joy of discovery, and with the beauty of living deliberately. A reflective question to hold in mind. What would happen if you threw away the list and trusted yourself to follow the flow of your own curiosity and intention? Even imagining it can reveal how much tension, distraction, or constraint the list imposes. And yet, in that same imagination, you may glimpse the calm, expansive energy that emerges when structure serves awareness rather than control. Ultimately, this transformation, from rigid doing to fluid being, creates space for life to surprise, delight, and teach us. By letting go, we discover not chaos, but rhythm, not aimlessness, but flow, not emptiness, but the fullness of authentic engagement. It is a quiet revolution, a shift that ripples through every action, every thought, every interaction. And in that space, we find freedom. Freedom to create, to connect, to grow, and to live fully without the constant weight of the to-do list. As we draw this conversation to a close, let's return to the central image that has guided us throughout, the to-do list. Not the list itself, but the act of letting it go. Throwing away the list is more than a metaphor. It is a deliberate gesture of trust. Trust in yourself, Trust in your capacity to navigate life with awareness, and trust in the rhythms of your own energy and curiosity. It symbolizes a willingness to step out of autopilot, to step away from the constant pressure to perform, and to step into a life that prioritizes presence, intention, and meaning over mere completion. Think for a moment about your own relationship with lists. How often do you rush from one task to the next, eyes fixed on what's next, without noticing what is happening in the present? How often do you measure your worth by what you accomplish, rather than by how fully you engage with the moment? The act of letting go asks us to pause, to notice, and to reclaim a sense of agency. It invites reflection. Which tasks are truly essential? Which are habitual or externally imposed? And which can be released, leaving space for what matters most? Releasing the list is not about abandoning responsibility or surrendering to chaos. It is about redefining productivity itself. Instead of asking, "How much did I do today?" we can ask, "How fully did I live?" Productivity shifts from quantity to quality, from output to presence, from ticking boxes to cultivating awareness. Every action becomes infused with conscious choice. Every interaction, every decision, every quiet moment carries intention. And in this shift, there is a subtle but profound liberation, a chance to reconnect with creativity, with relationships, and with the depth of your own inner life. I invite you to experiment, even in small ways. Tomorrow, you might try starting the day without opening your to-do list. Instead, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what do I want to bring into this day? What values, what energy, what curiosity will guide me? Notice how this simple practice changes your perception of time, your responsiveness to challenges, and your engagement with the people and moments around you. Reflect on what it feels like to act from intention rather than obligation, from alignment rather than pressure. And as you carry this reflection forward, consider a deeper question. What would your life feel like if you allowed presence, curiosity, and intention to replace the rigid rhythm of tasks and schedules? Imagine how your energy, your relationships, and your sense of fulfillment might shift. Imagine the small, quiet moments of insight, the spontaneous connections, the creativity that emerges when you stop trying to control every outcome. These are not abstract ideals. They are accessible realities, waiting for your conscious attention. So, as we end today's episode, let this be your gentle invitation. Experiment with letting go. Trust yourself. Notice your own rhythms. Choose intention over obligation. And remember, throwing away the list does not mean abandoning direction. It means reclaiming freedom, clarity, and presence. Life is not only about what we get done, it is about how fully, how consciously, how deeply we live. And in that living, you may discover a sense of alignment, resilience, and flow that no checklist could ever provide. Take a deep breath, feel the pause, and step into the day with curiosity, intention, and trust in your own capacity to navigate life fully, without the list, yet fully in control of your inner compass. This is the quiet power of living intentionally, the subtle art of being fully alive, and the freedom that awaits when we finally let go.